We will begin with the introductions. I know you have lots and lots of questions. Let's start at the far end of the table with Suzanne de Bec, India Hair, Benjamin Laverne, and here we have Pascal Grégory and Pierre Richard, and the director Mai Wen. Before I give you the floor, I would like to ask you a very simple question. It was very beautiful to see how moved you were after the screening. I had the impression that you were all deeply moved. Yes, I was indeed. It's a film that I've been thinking about for 17 years. It was a sort of an obsession. I started working on it in 2016. There was a huge amount of emotion because the film was released at the same time in France, so it was a double the pressure. And for the actors? Huge emotion to see the film on the screen and share this with everyone. I discovered it yesterday. It was quite incredible to live and experience this all together. It was wonderful. Yes, absolutely. I agree. It was the first time I was in Cannes too, so there's something quite sacred when you come to this temple of the cinema. We were defending a real group film. Cannes is an opportunity to meet together as a team and see the film again on this huge screen. Gentlemen, I've often been in Cannes, during the festival, of course, but this is the first time that I've been here with a film. So obviously I was scared stiff, but I was very excited at the same time. I felt tremendous pleasure, commensurate with the warm welcome given to the film. It was a lovely moment. So I hope I'll come back for another one. I'd like to thank Mai Wen for being here. Yes, thank you, Mai Wen. And thank you to you all. It's always a wonderful cast. And as some people know, I have been in a number of films in competition here. So going up the red carpet was a form of continuity. Maybe it won't happen to me again, but it was extremely moving. Okay. We'll take a first question.
Bonjour, je m'appelle
Hello,
Nicolette Falertu,
I'm Nicolette Falertu. I would like to ask a question to Mai Wen. I was deeply impressed by the performance of Johnny Depp, who unfortunately isn't yet here. He'll be here in a minute. Could you please tell me why you chose Johnny Depp to portray a French king? First of all, before I went to see Johnny, I proposed the part to some French actors who I very much enjoy, but that didn't work out. I wanted to be faithful to my desires, and I thought that what I wanted was far more important than necessarily having a French actor. I wanted to really feel strongly about the actor, particularly as I would be hugging and kissing him later on.
Hello.
Après, je peux aussi quand même. Excusez-moi, je suis un peu impressionnée, donc.
I'm a bit impressed. Sorry. So perhaps my answers are a bit short. Johnny, when I met him, was already very familiar with the history of France. He often says in interviews that he feels very much at home in France. He said this for 20 years, and it's not just a posture. He's very curious about France. He loves the country. He's very knowledgeable about French cinema, painting, and music. At no moment did I say, well, he'll have to study French history. He already knew much more than I did about Louis XV. And when I met him, it seemed an obvious choice. We met at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and finished our interview at midnight, and we hardly talked about the cinema at all. I really fell in love with him in this part.
Hello, my name is Ayako Ishizu for Korea, Japan. And the question for Marianne. Why did you decide to not portray, not depict the death of the Jeanne?
Excusez-moi, j'ai pas compris la question.
Pourquoi vous avez voulu ne pas montrer la mort de Jeanne, ne pas aller jusqu'au bout de son histoire
Ça va quand même au bout de son histoire parce qu'on sait
I
sa
do
trajectoire jusqu'au bout.
go all the way through to the end of her story. We know what happened to her towards the end, but I didn't want to film her death scene because I wanted to stick to the love scene.
Je me suis posé 1000 questions parce qu'il y a pas
I
que
asked
la
myself
mort
many,
de
many
Jeanne que
questions.
j'aurais aimé filmer.
I would have loved to film not just the death of Jeanne, but also other relationships I would have liked to develop, particularly when she left Versailles and how she reacted to his death. But I had to make choices. I felt, therefore, that the part of her life that I wanted to focus on was the part when she's in love with the king. The consequences also of her life in Versailles were a very interesting aspect. I didn't want the film to look like a biopic, which ran through all the key moments in her life. I wanted to focus on the love story above all, and how people in Versailles spoke disparagingly about her. That's what I wanted to film more than the key moments in her life. I noticed that in biopics, the films tend just to run through the whole life of these historic characters without going deeper into the human relationships. What interests me, above all, when I write a film, is to delve into human relationships and the paradoxes you find thererein. Before I take another question, I'd like to put a question to Mai Wen and to you all as well. What surprised me in the film was this balance between tradition, how you describe all the customs in Versailles, which are sometimes quite incredible, and the modern side of things, which is very relevant. We're not talking about Marie Antoinette, where things appear more modern, but there is this modern aspect to the film. How did you manage to strike this balance in terms of the performance of the actors and the staging? Did you say, well, don't act as though you were in a historical film? How did you strike this balance? When I started to write the film, I had sudden realizations. I saw lots of films on the 18th century, in particular on Marie Antoinette. Well, Jeanne du Barry, there isn't much about her. And I noticed that when I didn't like the films I was watching, it's because the dialogues were in old-fashioned French and there was too much dialogue. When I liked the films, it's because the directors imposed his or her authority and view of things. So I said to myself, well, I must find my own identity, my own way of writing. I shouldn't be impressed by the time, by old French-style language. And that's where the personality of the screenwriter comes through. At no point in time did I say I want the film to be a modern one. I never said to myself, for example, that the film had to be anachronistic. I wanted the actors to be just right in sort of timeless dialogues. I wanted things to be timeless, more than to have an 18th century style dialogue. And when we began shooting the various scenes, I told the actors not to remain glued to the text. I wanted them to be very natural. I quickly understood that it wasn't a good idea to let them improvise too much, because the tone became that of a parody or that of a comedy. So I directed them and said, well, stick to the text, but if there are words or commas that you don't think are right, well, then just say so. I want you to feel at home with the dialogue. So this is how I tried to strike a happy balance between respecting the time and respecting the actors. I think they all have their own way of talking about the filming. I remember you said during the takes that the actor had to be believable as a person of the times. As to the literary aspect of the language, we didn't want to feel that we were blocked in some dusty kind of language, but it was a bit like a laboratory. People were saying, well, look for this or look for that. We didn't want things to become vulgar in any way or too popular. We needed to stick to the historical aspect, but we were careful not to use too many ellipses. We didn't want to say, don't do this. Rather, we felt it was important to say, do not. You had to retain a given level of language in the course of the dialogues, while searching for the truth and a certain frailty, of course. And so you said, well, try to say this in your own words. Well, I don't have a feather pen like people did at the time. I don't know how people did write at the time. So often what we did was to revert to what was written. Also, I wanted to stick to the idea that in Versailles, spontaneity was not something very proper. And this can be seen in the characters in Versailles. My character could be fairly spontaneous, and that's what I was looking for. I wanted Jeanne's charm to be quite clear and come through in the film. But as to the others, they had to be very upright, strict, proper. There was a lot of etiquette in Versailles. Appearances counted a lot.
Bonjour, Madame. I have a question about the character Zamor. How much research did you do in making his character? First of all, was he an actual character in history? I know that there were certain children from Africa who were sold into as pages or slaves back then, but how historically accurate were you with Zamor, and what was your thinking in making him in the life that you portrayed that he lived with Madame Jeanne du Barry?
Ok, je crois avoir tout compris, mais peut-être ce serait bien.
Alors d'abord, est-ce que Zamor est un personnage qui a vraiment existé?
So the question is being repeated. Did Zamor really exist as a character? And what did you really want to convey through him and his relationship with Jeanne du Barry? The character of Zamor did indeed exist for real. I read everything that had been written on him. I hope that it wasn't a romanced version. In the first version, the relationship between Jeanne and Zamor took up a lot of space, and this is a story that keenly interested me. I always felt it was worthwhile to say this and portray it. It was a way of saying that Jeanne was full of paradoxes. She loved the child very dearly, and then when he was 12 or 13, she rejected him. I felt it was important to show this in the film. It's a portrait of the time. And what was the next part of the question? The relationship at the beginning. Jeanne, and I hope you sense this in the film, has strong maternal feelings. She loved Adolphe, her stepson, portrayed by Thibaut Bonenfant, and she was very maternal towards Zamor. She wanted to educate him and did her utmost to ensure that he would receive an education. Unfortunately, how can I put this? She depended too much, perhaps, on the way the court viewed her, in particular the daughters of the king. So she, in the end, rejected Zamor. In Jeanne's head, in order to be accepted by the court, perhaps she felt it was necessary to reject this young boy.
Après, j'ai voulu faire des choix. En fait,
I had to make choices, of course. The story of Jeanne and Zamore deserves an entire film because it's so beautiful and strong and powerful while being harsh and violent at the same time. Zamore, it was said, was one of the persons responsible for Jeanne being guillotined because he denounced her to the revolutionaries. But he seemed to love her very much when he grew up. I think we're going to have a visitor in a few minutes' time. Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny Depp.
Et donc j'ai perdu le fil.
I forgot what I was saying. You said that Zamore was very much in love with her. He certainly loved her very much when he was governor, and then he rejected her, and unfortunately he took his revenge, and he died of cold and hunger, having taught French, which proves that what Jeanne did for him really served him throughout his life.
You just arrived. I just wanted to ask you the question I asked everybody at the beginning of the press conf. The emotion yesterday after the screening was very touching images to watch. What was the feeling? Just very simply, what was the feeling after the screening yesterday and this standing ovation?
For a couple of seconds, it sort of scared me because it felt like we were stuck in a loop. You know, when we were standing, and the applause and the reaction from the audience, just the energy of their reaction was, yeah, it just seemed to go. It just seemed to go on, and I was, yeah, you know, you become like a kind of a, because we're all sort of mommies and daddies of the film in a weird way. My Win, of course, this is her baby, but proud. I was very proud to see the comeuppance of the result of good work. I haven't seen the thing, but I know it's good because they said so. And I trust them.
All right, on va prendre une question.
Oui, bonjour. Benoît Berthelot de Bloomberg. J'ai une question pour
Bloomberg. I have a question for Maïwen about the financing of the film. You said that the financing of the film was complicated. It received financing from Saudi sources. This is a first for a French film. Were there certain strings attached for the film? Was this important? And then there was financing from Netflix too. Is the presence of Johnny Depp, was that an issue for Netflix? Well, when it comes to the production, you don't have just the Saudis. There are several producers. It was a film that needed a big budget. There were no strings attached in terms of the Saudis. I'm very proud that it was produced inter alia by the Saudi. Things are changing. I'd be very proud to go there and present the film. Things are changing. This is not the first French film produced by Saudis. Look at Red Sea. There are lots of other films which are recognized around the world with Saudi financing. As to Netflix, no, it was never an issue. I always said that I would make the film with Johnny, and Netflix and never raised the issue.
On a une question par là-bas. Là-bas.
Joël Virstel, Satellite. J'avais une question
I have a question about the relationship between Benjamin Laverne and Maïwen, which I find is quite extraordinary. There's great restraint. But I'd like also to put a question to Johnny Depp.
Were you surprised to be chosen for this role, and how was it to shoot in French? Was it difficult for you?
Was I surprised? Yeah. I thought someone had there was a terrible misspelling somewhere. And Maïwen and I ended up in the wrong room at the same time. I didn't feel any hesitation with regard to the character and all that. Or the language necessarily, I didn't find particularly intimidating. You know, a bit of a, you know, it's a bit like running through the raindrops. But my question to my when we first met was, maybe you want to try a French guy as King, you know, Louis, as Louis XV. She thought about it for a second. She said, I thought about that too. Nah, I want you to do it. So I thought it was very brave of her to choose some hillbilly from Kentucky to play Louis XV. Very brave. So yeah, I was instantly, up for it, wanted to do it. Just wanted to make sure that I wasn't, I don't know, stepping out of my box and into someone else's, getting into other people's things, culture, thoughts, weirdness. But I'm glad she persisted, and I'm glad I persisted. And the experience of doing the film in French was, I wanted at least to be my pidgin French, at least I wanted it to be in some regard. I wanted to be able to improvise if necessary. So that was again, you're way outside your language, your vernacular, and your way of expressing yourself. But yeah, it was. She was very patient with me. I'll put it that way.
All right, we have a question over there.
Mr. Depp, on your right.
Hi.
Anthony D'Alessandro from Deadline Hollywood. You had bravo on the film. You had mentioned in an interview in the Sunday Times back in 2021 that you felt boycotted by Hollywood. Do you still feel that? Do you feel that the tide is changing toward you doing major studio films again?
It's not my tide that we're discussing. Did I feel boycotted by Hollywood? Well, you'd have to not have a pulse to feel at that point, to feel like, no, none of this is happening. This is actually just a kind of a weird joke. You've been asleep for 35 years. So just let the weirdness commence. Of course, when you're asked to resign from a film you're doing because of something that is merely a bunch of kind of vowels and consonants floating in the air, yeah, you feel a bit boycotted. Do I feel boycotted now? No, not at all. But I don't feel boycotted by Hollywood because I don't think about it. I don't think about Hollywood. I don't have much further need for Hollywood myself. I don't know how you guys feel, but yeah, I think it's a very strange, funny time where everybody would love to be able to be themselves, but they can't because they must fall in line with the person in front of them. You want to live that kind of life? I wish you the best. I'll be on the other side somewhere,
Question.
Thanks.
Oui, bonjour. Cathy Melen de la RTBF, Radio-Télévision Belge.
Belgian
I'm going to ask
Radio
my
and
question
TV.
in English because it's for Johnny Depp. Hello. But Maïwen, if you want to answer, n'hésitez pas si vous voulez répondre. Johnny, we know that Cannes is a wonderful place for movies, but it's also a great mediatic circus.
So how do you feel coming here, coming back on the spotlight, a lot of controversy, not especially talking about the movie. How both do you feel with that sometimes toxic surrounding? Thank you.
Je ne lis pas la presse.
I don't read the press. I don't watch TV. I don't listen to radio programs about my film.
Je me protège.
I protect myself in this way. I don't know what people are saying. What's very important is to remain faithful to what one wants to do, to go through and finish the film together with the cast and the crew.
Peut-être qu'il se dit forcément des choses
négatives
sur le film.
Negative things are being said about the film. I think all sorts of rubbish is being said. But that's what happens in Cannes sometimes. It's not my first festival. I know how things work. The film was released yesterday. It's working extremely well. It's a great success, and I'm very happy.
What happened now? What do I say now? I first came to Cannes, it was like 92 or something. I came to Cannes accidentally, to the festival accidentally with Emir Kusturica, and it was absolutely a circus like nothing I'd ever seen. It remains the same. And I think that's very good. Different faces, same actions, same everything. And so the circus part is the weirdest part. Because it's sort of like you say, you know, folks out there want to, well, I mean, you believe what you believe. The truth is the truth, you know. As far as it being a positive or a negative to the film, all the sort of abstract whispers, you know, but all that does is it. Maybe people talk about the film in this way, or they will talk about your work in a certain way, up to a certain point. But the fact is, like, we're all here because we made a film, not because we have a product to sell, but we made a film. Everything that the majority of you who've been reading for the last 5 or 6 years have been reading, I mean, with regard to me and my life, the majority of what you've read is fantastically, horrifically written fiction. So the fact is, as I was saying, we're here to talk about a film, but, you know, it's like asking a question. How are you doing? But what's underneath in the subtext is, God, I hate you. Do you know what I mean? So that's the sort of media thing. But the focus should be simply on the fact that it's a miracle to get a film made that you care about in the first place. So you succeed there, you win right there. But to get a film like this made, and with the caliber of people and the vision of a absolutely, you know, a forward-moving artist, that's the focus. That should be the real focus. All the stuff that you can stuff your shoes with, you know, or line your parrot cage with, I mean, it's boring, isn't it? Are you guys sick of it by now? It's weird. $100,000 bird sings unrecorded Beatles songs. You'll get it later, I promise.
All right, we got a question in the center over there.
Hello, Florencia Angelis from W Radio in Colombia. Tout d'abord, merci beaucoup pour le film.
Thank you very much for the film.
And a question for Johnny. How did you prepare this character? You speak perfectly French with a good accent. I saw Louis XV with you yesterday, and I imagine that it's not so easy to put yourself in the shoes of the King of France, being a not French guy. Thank you.
What was the original part of the question? I'm sorry.
How did you prepare for the film?
Well, I knew that the first thing to focus on was most assuredly language, pronunciation, not the sort of, you can't use certain phrases that you'd love to use, like le cul bord des nouilles. Doesn't really work coming out of Louis XV's mouth, though I'm sure it did. But so yeah, it was really just trying to be as precise as possible and focused as possible. And I had an amazing French coach, Mathilde, who was fiery and mean and abused me. I'm kidding. No, she's a wonderful French teacher, and she was there, and she was diligent, and she made me stretch my mouth in weird places. But I still like her. She's wonderful, and also, I mean, for them, all the, this is their native tongue. Me, I'm sort of flapping around and hoping that the next word will come out in some form of French. It was fun, because I had a lot of help, and mainly they felt sorry for me and just do a couple of takes and send me to my trailer. I'd cry, I'd lay there and weep for hours. I had a very good teacher, and I had a lot of patient actors and crew.
Oui, justement,
je me souviens qu'il ne le dit pas, mais
he's not saying
je
this,
sais
but
qu'il avait un morceau de musique pour
he
chaque
had
scène.
some piece of music for each scene.
Un morceau de musique pour chaque scène. Expliquez-nous ça.
Quand je sais que pour sa mort, je crois qu'il
At the time of his death, I think he was listening to Bach.
Voilà. Il était dans sa bulle et il
He was in his bubble, so to speak, and he listened to the music. He studied which piece of music he wanted to listen to beforehand. And when he turned up in the morning and he showed me the scene, there were arrows all over the place and drawings.
Voilà, c'était très impressionnant.
It was very impressive
à quel point il
to
voulait
see to what extent
son regard,
he wanted really
sa vision.
to convey his vision, his way of looking at things. Here you've referred only to French, but I was deeply impressed by
de l'étude qu'il a fait, pas seulement sur Louis XV, mais sur l'époque.
His studying of Louis XV and the times, the epoch.
Pour les autres acteurs, c'est comment de jouer
For
en
the other
français avec Johnny
actors,
Depp?
what's it like to act in French with Johnny Depp? At what point in time did you say, "Oh, well, it was okay"? Johnny is amazing. When he goes about his work, he's very warm. He makes you feel very much at ease. And he's a great star, and he says, "Oh, well, hold on tight. It's going to be a rough ride." And there's a huge amount of collaboration working with him, and he's very humble. He was deeply impressive in this respect. We were all in it together, and he enabled us to share things. That was very valuable, because we're sort of a duo. We have to give the impression that we know each other by heart. The valet of the king is his closest collaborator, almost his closest friend. But we didn't have much text together, so everything had to be portrayed in the way we looked at each other. So we had great pleasure working together, and Johnny helped me no end, and he said to me, well, come on, let's work together, and we'll propose to Maïwenn that we edit this or add that. And I very quickly felt extremely at ease. I know it really bore results, and very quickly we established this complicity in our work. I was deeply impressed when it came to the French language. It's very difficult to pronounce the French R, and he managed it right away, and he really looked like a king. I was quickly reassured and thought, no, it's going to be very believable indeed. It's going to be fine. The first time I met with Johnny, I spoke to him exclusively in French. I didn't want to speak to him in English at all. I was struck to see, and I'm not saying this because we're in Cannes, because that doesn't influence me in any way. His French pronunciation was perfect. It's just that every so often he searched for the right word. In English too, he says. But with the French R's and so on, everything Americans find it difficult to pronounce, well, he didn't have that problem at all.
Hi, this is Matt Donnelly from Variety. Mr. Depp, related to what you said earlier, there has been a bit of controversy about your presence here in Cannes regarding your past legal matters, personal legal matters. What would you say to those who think you should not have been here at the festival?
So we're talking theoretically about what would I do if there were people who didn't want me to come to the Cannes Film Festival? What if one day they did not allow me, under no circumstances, no matter what, I cannot go to McDonald's for life? Because somewhere, if you got them all in one room, there'd be 39 angry people watching me eat a Big Mac on a loop. Just for fun. Who are they? Why do they care? Some species, some tower of mashed potatoes covering the light of a computer screen, anonymous, with apparently a lot of spare time. I don't think I'm the one who should be worried. I think people should really think about what it's all about, really.
Okay, we're gonna
Sort
get
of.
another.
No.
Another one. Yeah.
So hello, my name is Yael Khan. I'm a French journalist. So for Johnny Depp, you have been recently exposed on the international stage.
I was exposed this morning. To myself, of course.
And I want to know what's your mindset getting back of acting? Do you approach it any differently as before? And also, I have another question.
What's I laugh more.
No, just one question. Yes.
Oh. No, I mean, it's weird. People have seen or heard the word comeback exchanged by folks, and using that as the sort of catchphrase of, the guy's, he's making a comeback, or he's made a comeback. And after whatever experiences, not only myself, but other people have experienced, whatever anybody's been through over the COVID years, over the this or the that, and suddenly the film comes to the Cannes Film Festival, and then this wonderful new word. By the way, I've had about 17 comebacks, apparently. I keep wondering about the word comeback because I didn't go anywhere. As a matter of fact, I live about 45 minutes away. So, yeah, maybe people stopped calling out of whatever their fear was at the time. But no, I didn't go nowhere. I've been sitting around. So comeback is sort of like, you know, it's almost like I'm going to come out and do a tap dance or some kind of, you know, spectacle here on the table and, you know, dance my best for you guys and hope that you approve. The notion of something like that is a bizarre mystery.
One last question. We only have time for one question.
Mine?
Oui. Yeah. Stand up.
Hi, I'm Alessandra Tommasi from Italian newspaper Leggo, and I was wondering about the movie. Do you think, Johnny Depp, do you think that the situation that the king lives in, like this kind of attention, the hierarchy, is more or less like the celebrity status when everyone wants something for you, and on top it's very lonely, and we can see this king that's lonely and kind of betrayed by the daughters as well. I mean, how do you see the comparison? Do you relate to that? Thank you.
La question, c'est voyez-vous la comparaison entre être roi et être star et comment ça se rejoint au niveau de la vie du roi à l'époque et les stars. C'est pour Johnny Depp.
I think, you know, I would think that pretty much anybody could make a similar kind of personal comparison. That is to say, you can apply your own experiences to anything and everything that you do. And I didn't, what I felt was most important about the character, just for foundationally, just was the very idea that first you need to figure out a way that the viewer can forget who you are and can forget all the baggage you carry within the first 3 to 4 minutes of the film. That's your biggest hope. So that you say, forget completely who you are. If you got there, you got good through. You did all right for a minute. But also thinking about a character in terms of the various people he has to be. Being the king, he's got to have 7, 8 different personalities in terms of who he deals with, how he deals with him. So I thought it was an interesting study in what a young boy was, when he was made king at such a young age, and this vernacular and this language that he's like, he will speak with Laborde very differently than he would speak with any other character. Laborde and he is very close, so that would be a very tight thing. With Maïwenne's character, with Jeanne du Barry, again, it's another approach. It's another slice of the king, because he's had to sort of pie himself to maintain sort of sanity, I suppose, and distance and respect. So that was kind of the foundationally the most important. And I hope the French worked. If it doesn't, you can always play it backwards and it'll say something else. That's what they tell me, I don't know.
Une dernière chose à vous dire, one last thing. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.